Derek, thank you so much for joining me. We got linked up through both of our good friends, Will Freemon. First off, how you doing today?
Honestly, today's been crazy.
Really? Talk me through it. You are your own business owner, so I'm sure.
It's never a dull moment. You know that. I knew I was doing this today, and I'm a little nervous. I'm not on camera a lot,
Yeah.
Not done a podcast before. So I was like, man, I gotta have a good day, gotta have some serenity going into this, and of course that's the total opposite.
That's not the day you had planned.
No, not at all. And it was capped off. It was right before I came over here. Actually, I had a big, huge beard earlier today. My wife's like, "You got such a nice chin," she said. "You got to get out there." So I wanted to shave, and so I'm shaving, and I get halfway, I get half the beard, and the razor just completely stops working, the electric one. So
I'm always stressed about that.
They say you're never supposed to get a haircut on the day of a job interview. It's that kind of thing. And so I'm just looking in the mirror with half a beard, and I'm like, man, I got to be on camera in 20 minutes, and I just started laughing.
You got it figured out.
I did, yeah, it worked.
You do have some nice long hair for the people that are just listening.
Yes, thank you.
With your story, I kind of want to start at the beginning. You were born in Connecticut?
Connecticut, yep.
Growing up for you, what was life like? Did you have brothers and sisters? What did your parents do?
So I've realized it more recently that I do come from a long line of entrepreneurs, and my parent, when I was born, we had next to nothing. We lived in a single bedroom apartment in Waterbury, Connecticut. I was born in Bridgeport, but my parents had scraped some money together and bought a coffee truck.
Nice.
So they were cooking meals every night. They had my grandmother making sandwiches, and they got everybody involved, and they would go to job sites and sell coffee and sandwiches to all the workers around there. And so that was the start. And so they also both were really handy, and they would do a bunch of work on whatever apartment we lived in, and so we could move into a better one and into a better one, and then eventually we had a house, and then they would do work on that, flip that, and
nice. You did some real estate?
Well, they were eventually, yeah, they both actually eventually got into real estate, but coming up, it was a lot. It was moving. I moved almost every year of my life. Actually, I was counting it up. I'm 34 years old. I've moved probably 60 times.
Damn, son.
It's a lot. So they say these most stressful things is divorce, death, and moving. Mm-hmm. But to me, the moving is like, I'm fine.
Yeah?
I'll move tomorrow.
Do you think that shaped any of your childhood?
Definitely. And I think that it was, there's a positive and a negative, like most things. And so the negative would be having difficulty really planting strong roots, deep relationships. I don't have any relationships with, like you and Will have known each other forever. I don't really have anything like that. I meet people who have been friends since they were 5. I don't know what that's like. But on the positive side, I was forced into a place where I had to be able to adapt and be flexible and fit in and make friends with different kinds of people and relate to people, and it's helped me a lot, I think, overall.
Yeah. With that, did you say you had brothers and sisters?
I have one sister. She lives in Boston. She does real estate.
Oh, cool.
She's amazing. She's an absolute brilliant genius, hilarious, super talented, successful.
Were y'all super close growing up? I mean, I'm thinking if you're moving, like you said, you might not have like kids that you have been friends with forever, but you probably have a sibling.
That's a great point, actually. Yeah, I appreciate that. And my dad always told us we're built-in best friends. We're only 18 months apart. So we both started school, or we both got advanced a grade early on in school, and so we both were some of the youngest kids in our grade, but shared a lot of the same friend groups, and so we've always been tight. Yeah. So we did have that constant throughout the ups and downs of everything.
When you were growing up, and I'm guessing you're constantly moving schools too, if you're constantly moving. But what were some things that you did to stay busy? And like, how would you describe yourself as a kid?
I think I was very curious always. I think I had a lot of interests. I think that it was difficult I've always been this way, where I loved starting projects, but finishing them was a real problem. I had a million ideas. I was coming up with new inventions, and I had found this thing from kindergarten. You draw, I'm in kindergarten, I'm 4 actually, and you draw yourself as an adult, what you want to be when you grow up. And I wrote, I want to be a mad scientist.
Nice.
And I drew a picture of a crazy guy with the hair and the flasks and stuff. And I did become that in some ways eventually, but I like the escapism, perhaps, is some of it. Fantasy world, big imagination. I would draw a lot, I would read constantly, just crushing books, and the Goosebumps, R.L. Stein. Read probably every side, just crazy bookshelves, and my sister was really the same way. So we did a lot of that. I think that early on, the first like 5-6 years, everything was great. They started having some problems at home. My father's an alcoholic. And I think at that time, some things started to shift, and I started seeking negative attention a lot. I had to be the class clown, and I wanted everybody to like me, and I didn't really care how that happened. And school was always very easy. I could just kind of snooze through class and not pay attention, but still do well on the tests, and drove my teachers crazy. But school was never really important. I never put that as a priority. It was always like social. What do people think of me?
Yeah. You wanted an acceptance. Do you think when did you start realizing your dad was an alcoholic?
I remember early on, there were just, because things were so peaceful and so chill for so long, that had been, and I'm really grateful to have had a semblance of a normal childhood through like really truly formative years, the first 1,000 days of life, how critical that is for people coming up. And there wasn't really issues, I think, till I was probably 7 or 8, and I knew my mom was upset a lot. I could hear them yelling at each other. I could start to sense there was a disturbance there. And it was disturbing, to a kid who's accustomed to having a nice, peaceful life,
Yeah. When you were away from the home, did you find yourself trying to like seek that acceptance through drugs and alcohol eventually?
Eventually, yeah. And so when things continued to devolve, and when I was around 11, 12, they finally got divorced, and my dad had really burned his life to the ground, but was still just sort of haunting the local area. And he had lost his license, but he was on a bike everywhere, and he was drunk almost all the time. And it became a very difficult thing as kids. I remember I played lacrosse, and all the parents are there watching their kids, but my dad would show up late, park on the other side of the fence away from everybody, and just sit in the back of his pickup truck blasting Metallica and just crushing beers. And at the time, I'm like, my dad's cool, this is awesome. But looking back, I was like, I did feel that kind of, the other parents were like, wow, is this kid okay? Like, that's abnormal behavior,
Totally. With that being a child too, it's hard to like accept like a parent, might be doing something wrong in a sense.
Yeah, there was a lot of inner conflict, I think.
Especially like, your dad,
Yeah, being torn. And years later in treatment, I went to therapy really openly for the first time, and she pointed out that you had to become the man of the house at like 8 years old. And I never really considered that, but looking back, I always was sort of pulled a lot of different directions, trying to hold things together and make sure everybody was okay,
Sure. What was your relationship with your mom then?
I love my mom. She's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'd be without her, she's the greatest. And I put her through hell for a while, because during that time, having that family unit decimated in that fashion, and then I found escape in drugs and alcohol pretty early on. I was probably 12 when I started doing stuff like that, and my mom was trying to raise 2 kids by herself, and getting no support. She was always working. We were just hellions, and so we had a lot of battles. I stayed up too late. I could never get up. Every single morning was a giant battle, just trying to get me out of bed to get to school. I was always in trouble, getting arrested a lot, in trouble at school a lot, barely graduated. I had to go to military school in New York during that time, which was a whole other adventure.
Through the troubles you got in?
Yes.
With you mentioned playing in a band earlier. Were you always involved in music early, even through your teens?
Yeah, so that was one great gift from my father, was this real love and passion for music. My mother's also loves music. But my dad, when he was a kid, he always wanted to play guitar.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a brutal childhood. He had. There was one instance where he finally had a guitar as a kid and he wanted to play, but he had a really abusive person in the house, his mom's boyfriend, who wouldn't let him play, and he broke his guitar and beat him up, and it really kind of crushed his dreams, I think. And so here I come, and he's like, "You want to play guitar? You want to play guitar?" And I was like, "Yeah." He exposed me to a lot of great. It's one of the first CDs I had. I was probably 5 years old. I had Jimi Hendrix, Electric Ladyland, and I just play it over and over.
That's one of my dad's favorite. Yeah.
So he put me onto a lot of good stuff, and I started playing guitar probably around 11, and I just was obsessed. I had this obsessive mind still with other things, and that was the first one that I remember that really took hold, and I would just play it in my room just until my fingers bled. I wanted to get callus on my fingers so it didn't hurt anymore, and so I was just really, really obsessed.
With music too, and honestly that culture, it's a lot of drugs and alcohol too at times.
Yeah, I remember this is early. I was probably 14 years old. I was in a band with a bunch of Brazilians, actually. There's a lot of Brazilians in Bridgeport, and they were all old. I was the youngest person in the band by probably 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I got linked in through some other friends. My friends were always older most of my life for whatever reason, and we were in New York City recording a demo, and I'm like this young kid, and it was crazy up there, just with drinking and getting high and doing crazy stuff, and it just seemed normal. It always seemed normal,
Mm-hmm.
and from very early on, when I got to experience those feelings of like, wow, I feel good. I haven't felt good in a long time. You know, realizing it was my problem all along, all through my teens and 20s and everything, was that I was allergic to sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
I had a real problem with being sober. If I was sober with no drugs and alcohol in my body, I felt like something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding that, it was like finally being able to breathe after having a bag on your head, you know.
Yeah, totally.
And so it just seemed to make, that was the magic potion that made everything make sense. And it was, to me, it was like, why wouldn't everyone do this all the time?
Great, right?
Yeah.
With your troubles from acting out and like getting arrested, did a lot of that involve drugs and alcohol? Or were you doing other things?
Not always. Sometimes it's just fighting or being a vandal or just causing disturbances. MTV's Jackass came out around that
So
time.
you started doing that type of shit.
Yeah, dude. My childhood, as looking back, it's like,
I did some Jackass videos too, by the way.
who you couldn't resist, and so you look at
Jumping off roofs and shit.
how ahead of their time those guys were. Now it's like everyone has a camera in their pocket all the time, and kids can do whatever they want, and they do. But
Mm-hmm.
these guys were doing that with camcorders, and we were doing it with camcorders.
Mm-hmm.
And but I grew up with South Park, Dr. Dre's The Chronic 2001, WWF wrestling, the Attitude Era, Stone Cold Steve Austin,
Oh, yeah.
Jackass. It was like we were pretty sufficiently corrupted at a pretty young age, at least up north.
Yeah.
You know?
And we were doing a lot of that. I just turned 36, so we're kind of around the same age.
Right.
Have you, in your reflection of your childhood and your teenage years now, what do you consider some of the reasoning behind some of your actions? Was it for attention, or would you just get caught up in the wrong groups, or did you like the feeling of being high and drunk? Like, what, when you look at it now as a reflection, why do you think you were doing that sort of stuff?
I do think a lot of it was for attention.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was probably attention that I felt like I was missing. I feel like maybe on something that just occurred to me, maybe I was wanting more attention from my parents who were having trouble, and so that was just something that made sense to me at the time, even if not consciously. But I did tend to find the wrong groups. My parents had moved every year, so eventually we could go to good schools in a good town in Fairfield, Connecticut, and but I never exactly fit in. It was a very wealthy place. We never were like that. I always was sort of an outcast, and so, I had friends who, because when you're a kid, you don't care about all that stuff, and it's fine. And I would just go to my friend's house, and they live in this mega mansion, and I'm just like, wow, but I don't consider what these people do or that we're different, but there were differences. It was like this whole friend group is they're taking all the kids to Jamaica. And I'm like, I want to go, but my parents are like, what are you talking about? I went on one vacation my whole life,
Sure.
There was, and so over time, getting a little older, it starts to become a little more apparent, and I tended to gravitate toward the other kids from broken families where there's drug problems and divorced parents, and it turns out we all like to do the same things. We're all seeking that same thing,
What was going through high school and eventually, you go to a military school for college, and just talking to you, you can tell like you're a thinker, like you're an intellect in a way. When you had to end up going to a military school, was that a letdown to you? Did you have thoughts you might go to a different college? Like, what was your process of kind of what you want to do after?
I was really torn in the middle of all that. On some level, I realized early on that I needed some substantial changes to take place for me to really get anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It was an inkling, but it hadn't really solidified into like a plan of action or anything like that. And so I kind of welcomed the change of pace, and I liked the attention. It was like, oh, did you hear what happened to Derek? He got sent to military school. To me, that was kind of cool in a way. So it was very just immature type of thinking. The ego was still really inflamed. And
what was the reasoning you got sent there? And just talk me through that process. Like, do you get in trouble enough where you just have to go somewhere?
Yeah, that was my understanding of it. Was that at that point I was either going to juvenile detention or I could go to a military school, and I'm grateful that my mom was able to do what was necessary to get me into that place. It wasn't great. It was tough up there, but I think it was a good experience. I think it did help me a lot. It got me into the gym for the first time.
Nice.
I got in really good shape. I started to really understand about exercise, and I played basketball up there, and I made some friends, and we did some things, but I eventually got kicked out of there even because of drugs and alcohol.
What's the structure of a military school? Like, are they drug testing you? Are they, waking you up in the morning, make your bed, go to school type thing?
You're in the barracks, right? You have Alpha, Bravo, and Delta Company, and so I was in Alpha Company, and you have a roommate, you have taps right at 10 o'clock, lights off, everything's off. There's one of the military guys that work there, walking the hallways on patrol.
Dang.
They said that because everybody there smoked cigarettes, it was like the whole thing. And they said that there was guys out in the fields with the infrared looking for cigarette butts lit. I never saw any evidence of that, but you're up early. If you get in trouble, you're doing push-ups or you're doing tours where you walk around the quad with a rifle for hours and hours and hours. So a lot of the free time I was doing tours, and it was upstate New York, freezing, snow. It was brutal. I had a severe knee injury there for the first time.
Dang, what'd you do?
I dislocated my kneecap.
Yikes.
I looked at, I non-contact injury, juked, looked down, my leg's crooked on the ground. First Sergeant Penstock comes over, he was an old badass, and he said, oh, that's happened to me a million times, you want me to fix it? I'll yank it out. I said, no, please don't do it. But they took me to a hospital up there, and it was so backwards, woodsy, just these two, they looked like escaped mental patients, were the EMT guys, and they put me in the stretcher, and my kneecap's dislocated, bumping over all these crazy windy roads up in an ambulance. It was so brutal, but that injury was to be aggravated and compounded a couple years later, and that set off a pretty brutal pill addiction. I think this was 2007. I think there wasn't a lot of awareness about stuff like that at the time.
No, and that was, you're right. I mean, I think, 2004, 2005 it really started. 2007 it got extremely bad, and then it's still bad today, but the awareness was nowhere close. I mean, they were saying that these opioids were like miracle drugs.
Yeah.
At a certain, I think still around that.
Yeah, so I was a young kid who was a total drug addict, alcoholic even by that time.
You were what,
16, 17. They were like, oh, here's a prescription for Percocet, Valium, and Vicodin. Call us if you need more.
Good Lord, that's crazy.
I was like, this is the greatest.
Probably felt great for a little bit.
I remember around this, I think it was 06. This all might have happened a little earlier. It's a little blurry, but I remember Borat came out, and I remember going to see Borat on Percocets, Valiums, Vicodins, and just high on
At
weed.
16 or something.
And just what an incredible, hilarious experience. There was fun times, you know. It wasn't all dark all the time, and I think that's people get caught up in. It's like you're chasing the fun forever.
Mm-hmm.
There's good memories. There's fun stuff that happens in that world early on.
No, I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Because people, I don't think I tell them, like, people always like think when I was going through my addiction and, you know, my rehab, they think, oh, life must have been horrible. I'm like, nah, man, like, there was actually some really good times, but the lows were just really, really low. And I could not control it.
Right, exactly. And it's progressive, right? And
Yeah.
so by the time, from Borat, having fun with my friends, to 2015, like waking up and living in shambles and having no money and having lost all my jobs and lost everything, and I'm 60 pounds underweight, and that's a different experience.
Yeah, totally.
You know.
What were your, I mean, I see you now, and we've only known each other for maybe an hour, and like you talk like you had aspirations your whole life. Like even you talking to me about my podcast and grow my podcast, like your mind's thinking about business and entrepreneurship, and you know, did you have those types of aspirations then, or goals, or you know, thoughts of what you could do and what you could accomplish?
I think I did actually, you know, but I never could put it together. I never had a map. Neither of my parents went to college. Looking back, they were successful in their own right, in their own ways, and everybody has, I think people generally do the best they can with what they have, and I respect that. And but I remember, you know, and they always told me I was really smart and this and that, and you're talented. I was in gifted classes and all this kind of stuff, and so I think a lot of that pumped the ego, and there was a lot of grandiosity as a young man who had some talent and some intelligence, and I thought that I would just conquer the world, but I didn't. I would never have to try at it. As soon as it was like, well, these are the things you have to do, I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do something else. It was that same kind of pattern of like getting something started, getting fired up about something, and as soon as it became difficult, I was going to go start something else, you know. So that following through, completing projects, really moving forward with a focused goal, I never had that, you know. But I did want something bigger. I knew I was capable of more. But by the time I could have been able to start to solidify and move in some direction, the drugs and alcohol had already become a real priority. And so that was part of the realization. And I was 25 years old, I got sober, and I knew that I could not continue to drink and use the way I was if I wanted any kind of life worth having. You know, I proved it to myself over and over and over again. I cannot get out of just working at a restaurant and failing in and out of community college every year. You know?
What was the circle like for you, from addiction to maybe trying to realize you had an issue to trying to pick your life back up, and then what would normally be the trigger or the fallback?
It was very simple, actually. It was just, this time will be different.
Yeah, I would have been there for sure.
Right? It's that simple. It's not a big grand gesture. It's not this massive earth-shaking moment. It's just, you know what, this time will be different. It just starts with a thought. It's the obsession of the mind. It doesn't go away. And so I could get in a lot of trouble, and I could say, hey, I need to chill out. And maybe I'd chill out. Maybe it'd be a couple weeks. Maybe it'd be a month. And then, I'll just have fun. And I'll just do it just on weekends. Or I'll just drink beer. Or I'll just smoke weed. Or I'll just do Adderall. Or I'll just... I could drink vodka, but not whiskey. The brown stuff, that's the problem. Just constantly trying to figure out how to balance this thing, you know. But that's usually what brought it back. It didn't matter. I could have the right girlfriend or the right job or the right whatever. Stop for a little bit. I could not stay stopped. Yeah. Always went back to it. Didn't matter what the consequences.
For me, it was always like, oh, I can control it this time.
Right.
Like, I'll be able to control it. I can do it. I'll have like 3 weeks of sobriety, and then like, I can do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nope.
The great obsession of every abnormal drinker.
With your years leading up to 2015, when was the first time that you had acknowledged to yourself that you had an issue?
I think it was in there was a couple years leading up to that where I was messed up most of the time. I was out every night, and I built my life so that I could do that. I built my life around my drinking and my parties life, and those were my priorities. And I remember moments of being like, saying, almost joking, like, I'm an alcoholic. but kind of thinking about that, and it started to become more of a realization. And then it was in 2015 that year. There were moments where I was like, I remember partying in a junkyard late at night with a bunch of lunatics and people that people that were just like me, and walking past a mirror and a broken mirror, dirty mirror in a dirty junkyard bathroom, and being just starved. I could not recognize myself. It looked like a stranger in the mirror, and I'm staring at myself, and I was like, Jesus, like, what is it? And so that's a little moment. The reality pierces the delusion just for a moment, and then it was right back to it, but that memory sticks with me.
Yeah.
Or I had to sign a check or something for the first time in a long time, and I was at the bank, and I'm trying to write my name, and my hand just shot off the paper. I could barely control a pen, and it was shocking,
Yeah.
But significantly, the waking up when everything's gone and ransacking my apartment, looking in every drawer, digging apart the fridge, looking through the carpet, scraping the tables, I need this sudden awareness that there's something in here that demands something. Give me something. I don't care what it is. I need something.
Yeah.
And how vivid that was. Of like, there's something else in here that has
pulling you.
Yeah.
What was your mindset? What was your mental health like? Were you depressed? Were you suicidal? Were you waking up every day like what was your mindset and mental health like?
I don't know if it was ever great, but I don't think that it was ever something that I paid attention to much or allowed to control me,
Did you have horrible withdrawals? I remember withdrawals killing me, like me wanting to die because I was going through withdrawals.
No, I never experienced that. I never got to that point with alcohol that I'm waking up shaking violently until I had to drink in the morning, or, I remember going through withdrawals with the pain pills earlier on in high school and being so itchy and throwing up and just sick and horrible. And, but at that time it was like my prescriptions ran out. They weren't giving me any more. At that time I was healed. I think my mom had realized it was a real problem, and so she had intervened, and I just was forced to get over it and move on, and alcohol and pot and all these other kind of things were still so readily available. I'm actually grateful in retrospect to have kind of gotten that out of the way early on and realized it was never a thing that was for me. I did the opiate thing early. I'm more of a uppers, and alcohol was what I pursued more later on.
What's for your early in your recovery process?
I'm sorry, but to address what you were saying, because mental health, I think that the life I was living and what I was doing to myself on a regular basis, not only with drugs and alcohol, but my sleep was horrible.
Sure.
I was up all night, I would sleep all day, I was different every day, I had no regularity, no routine, I was not exercising at all, I was barely eating. I had anxiety and depression. What do you know? It's like those are symptoms of what I was doing. It's like there is clinical depression and there is anxiety. I understand those are real things, but in my experience, being a person who is a drug addict and an alcoholic, when I'm living that life, it can easily be diagnosed as depression or anxiety, or you just need this pill and everything will be fine. It's like, what else is going on here? Can I really be honest about it?
Yeah, without a doubt. With your recovery process, did you go to multiple rehabs, or like what was that for you, and how did you find, or maybe your first treatment center, or somebody that was willing to give you advice on how to get help?
So it was just bizarre divine intervention in a way, looking back at it. And I'm not a guy who grew up in the church, and I thought I was an atheist for my whole life, and I was really into science and all this stuff. And but looking back now at this point, way down the road, I could see like, wow, there's something. I don't know what it is exactly, but I know there's something, and I know that when I started living my life as if there is something bigger working here, things really started to improve drastically. But just the right person returned into my life at the right moment, and I had just hit a real severe bottom where I really had no other alternatives. And this person had suggested, they were sober a couple years. I found out later my sister had sort of orchestrated it that way, but they started bringing me to some 12-step meetings, and I thought this was the dumbest, most worthless endeavor I could possibly embark upon. And to go to a church basement and listen to nonsense from people who I don't like and we have nothing in common, can't identify at all. I was so lost and so repulsed by it. I never understood how that kind of thing could help anybody, but one day, and it's my sobriety day, it happened to be a book study, and we happened to be on page 1, and we happened to be in a meeting where there was other people that I could look at and say, I probably would have partied with this guy. The guys that came up to me and said, "Hey, are you new? Come take a seat. You want a cup of coffee? Here's a book." And I felt really connected and plugged in for the first time, and finally the words I could hear could make sense. And within a few pages in that book, I started reading my own thoughts and feelings out of this book from a guy who wrote it almost 100 years ago. And I've been sober since then.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So going into that meeting, did you have any sense that today might be the day, or like?
No, because
when you got home from that meeting, what were you feeling? Were you like, all right, I'm done?
I thought that, wow, it was the first time I thought like maybe I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is the way.
Yeah.
What
was your key to stacking days at that point? Were you going to meetings every day? Were you?
I remember that next day I got up and I'm sober 24 hours. It's day 2, right?
Yeah.
And being so lost and shaken, and I'm looking around my place and I'm like, God, it's like, I can't believe I've been living like this, and it's like,
damn.
And I reached over, and at that meeting, the guys gave out cards with their number on it and their name and the meeting schedule. And I just grabbed a card and I called it and I said, "This is Derek. I'm sober. This is my second day sober. I met you yesterday. I don't even know why I'm calling. I don't know what to say, but I don't know what to do." And the guy said, "Well, why don't you meet me at the meeting tonight at 7?" And I said, all right. And he said, "Great, I'll see you there." Click, and he hung up. And something in that moment changed, and now I at least had some kind of purpose for that day. I had some kind of goal just for that day. My goal was to get to the meeting. And it just kind of snowballed from there. The one day at a time thing, really, I was able to put that into action, and it's really not like I had anything better to do anyway,
Mm-hmm.
So
did you have a job at that point?
No, I lost both my jobs in one day. Yeah.
What was the community like for you? Where were you now? In Connecticut still?
Yeah, I stayed in Connecticut 3 weeks sober, to go to meetings and just talking to these guys. And I was supposed to move to Brooklyn. I had some friends there. The one guy got me a job at a restaurant in Manhattan, and I was kind of set on that. But this person who knew better, certainly, they were a couple years sober, and they had reached out to the sober living house in Los Angeles where they had gotten sober, and they did have a bed available for January 11th,
Nice.
2016. So I decided I'm going.
Yeah.
I'm gonna commit. I'm gonna dive in.
At that point, were you seeking out, like you said, you've been friends with, a lot of times your friends are older individuals for wisdom. Who were you going to on a daily basis?
At that point in my life, and this is actually part of what inspired me getting sober, is that 2015 was really transformative. A lot of things, like I know there's guys that come in and out for years. That wasn't my story. I had one white chip. As soon as I really came in and actually tried, I've been sober since then. I believe anybody could do that. I don't think relapse is a necessary requirement for sobriety. But I know amazing people in recovery who have relapsed a million times, and it took them a decade or more to get it. It takes what it takes. And so, but I had heard at this time, if you look at the 5 people closest to you, you're kind of the average of those 5. You get an idea of who you are based on the 5 people closest to you. And I was like, I have 2 friends left, and they are both the most psychopathic lunatics you'll ever meet in your life. And I was like, God, that does not bode well for me, And so there was no wisdom seeking at this time. But coming into a 12-step life early on in Los Angeles, I was going to lots of meetings, and I would hear.
You were in LA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the choice, was to move to the sober living house
That
in
was
LA.
in LA. Got it.
Yeah. So LA is like the mecca of recovery in the United States, and
I know some good people out there.
Yeah, and so that was an incredible experience for me. It really helped make recovery a lot more attractive, because I would meet some really incredible people that had something that I wanted. I wasn't accustomed to seeing people with something that I wanted because of where I was living and how I was living, and so to be out there and hear things and identify with things and connect with things, and to that all also helped to really open my mind spiritually to concepts of like, wow, maybe it's not just me, and the universe just started from nothing, and when you die you're just worm food and it's all over. Maybe it's bigger than that.
Yeah.
You know? That all started to become more and more true, and so being out there was awesome, and at that time I was able to seek wisdom from the elders, because now I had wise elders. I never had that before, you know.
What did you see in them that you wanted?
I think that there was it's just something about their eyes almost, you know.
The peacefulness.
There's a serenity within. There's something divine there that is kind of calls out to the divine spark within myself that I had buried for years and years and years, you know. And it was attractive in a way that you can't really describe.
Yeah.
It was just, I knew that they had something that I wanted, and if I could be like that, I think I'd be okay, you know.
What was your process of learning from them? Were you reaching out, just talking with
lots of calls, man? I had to get out of my own way. It was difficult being new but see, this is where, like, looking back at God's fingerprints, you know, every hardship I went through prepared me for something I would deal with in the future. And moving every year of my life and having to make new friends constantly really set me up for success, because I moved a lot in sober, and I've made the best friends I've had in my life all over the country, wherever I go, you know. So being out there, but even still early on, broken, beat down, nervous, anxious, depressed, it's hard to walk up to strangers and say, hey, I like what you said in there. Would you mind if I have your number and I call you sometime? But I would force myself to do that. And I would force myself to actually pick up the phone and call people. They would say, try to call 10 other alcoholics a day and see what happens.
Dang.
And I was like, well, I better get 10 phone numbers, you know. And then it was 20 phone numbers and 30. And now at this point, I have like probably 175 Johns in my phone, Chris's and Michael's, you know. And it's an amazing thing.
With when did you get the spirit back to be an entrepreneur?
I think that took some time. I think I needed to develop some other skills and character assets, and I used to continue to work in restaurants, early sobriety. I remember I worked at this fancy beer pizza place, Los Angeles, really cool, you know, and they had new beers on tap every week, and you had to, everyone get together and try the beers. And I called my sponsor and I was like, can I just try them and spit them out so I could at least describe them to the customer? He's like, no, you idiot. I was like, okay, yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, right.
Well, I also remember, because we read a lot about, there's a real difference between someone who is a real alcoholic versus someone who's a hard drinker. And they look the same on the surface, and they go through a lot of the same ups and downs. But a real alcoholic, when I start drinking, something wakes up and wants one more and wants one more and one more and one more. And normal people don't typically experience that. You know, one of the best ways I heard it described is that a regular person has a couple drinks. They feel like once they start to feel like they're losing control, they say, "Oh my gosh, I'm losing control. Let's shut it down. Let's take it easy. Let's switch to water. I got to pick my kids up in the morning. I'm gonna go home early." Me, when I have a couple drinks, I feel like I'm gaining control. I'm becoming more myself, more powerful, more and more and more and more. And I'm like, yeah, let's go. I don't care what time it is. You know, I will sacrifice all of my tomorrows for the chasing the feeling right now, right here and now, tonight. You know.
Yeah.
So that being said, I remember waiting tables early on. I'm a couple months sober. I'm getting all these ideas put in my head about sobriety and alcoholism and whatever. And I'm waiting on the guy, and his martini glass is empty. And I say, "Sir, would you like another drink?" And he goes, I think I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. I was like, wow, this is one of those normal drinkers they talk about.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I was the guy who, if we're as a group getting up and leaving, I have to stay and finish everyone's half drank beverage on the table because you can't just leave it behind. That's alcohol abuse,
Totally. With your entrepreneurial spirit, was that kicking in then? And then also what led you to Greenville?
So I moved to Florida from Los Angeles, and I was my mom had started my mom always was starting a business, just doing something, so she had started a landscaping company with my stepfather, and I went down there to help them with that. And I think that early on, a couple of years sober, I was just sponsoring a lot of guys, doing a lot of recovery stuff. That was really my priority. But I could get out and like really work hard every day, and it really helped me a lot, in so many ways that I can't really describe. And I was still going to school. I'd gone to school forever to try to be a doctor, but I kept meeting doctors that would tell me, "Don't do it. It's terrible. Be a PA or be a nurse practitioner. It's a much better gig at this point." And so I switched, and I was going to school for that, but I met some guys who were in the hearing aid business.
I was about to say, you do hearing aids. I heard you say that for Knox White.
Yeah. The hearing aid business changed my life, man. And it was a thing I never ever would have thought of in my whole life as something that was like even an option. Like, who considers that?
Yeah,
I know what a
hearing aid
is. Yeah, I know what a hearing aid is. I never thought about the guy who programmed that thing or the guy who made that thing or where it came from or anything. So the way things fell into place, it's just God's fingerprints all over everything. I had these strings in Florida. I was staying with my grandfather. He was getting older. In my head, I was helping him out and stuff, but really I was living for free and enjoying that. I had a little girlfriend that I thought I liked, and I had a band that I was in. And in 24-hour period, my grandfather woke up and he said, "I had this crazy dream last night, and I think you need to move out." And
all right.
The girl calls and says, "Listen, this isn't working. We need to move on." And my guitar player called and said, "I can't do the band anymore. I'm losing my voice. It's too loud. I'm freaking out." He had a mental breakdown. So I said, "All right, God, let's see what comes next." And the phone rings, and a buddy says, "Hey, there's an opening with so-and-so's hearing aid company. I think you'd be really good at it. Why don't you come up to Savannah?" And I said, "I guess that's what I'm doing." And so
that's so
I forewent going back. I was going to go to UCF and finish the nursing thing, and I said, "Let me put that off. I've been in 5 colleges in 10 years. What's another year, And I went, and I really fell in love with this work. Really, it had everything that I wanted. It had like the clinical medical aspect. You're in a white coat. You're working on people's ears. You're teaching them about hearing. But you had real significant patient contact. I really get to know these people and build relationships where every person that comes in, you're with for at least 30 minutes, but usually an hour, hour and a half, I know that regular doctors don't get that. It's in and out, you're really turning and burning, and I know that many of them want more patient time, and it's just not feasible. And so it's counseling, which I enjoy, and teaching people, which I enjoy. And it's also sales, which I enjoy. And it was this unbelievable fusion of just all these incredible things, but you're really rewarding work, seeing transformations in people's relationships and seeing the lights come back on. And it's very much akin to recovery when you see the lights come back on and you see people's relationships and lives restored. I took for granted forever how important hearing and communication is until getting into that and having a system that really worked, where most people hated their hearing aids because they weren't really counseled properly, and it wasn't a progressive adjustment period. So we took a lot of the principles from 12-step recovery and applied them to business, and it treated the patients like sponsees and treated hearing loss like addiction, and taking them by the hand and walking them to the finish line, and it was really powerful, and we were extremely successful.
So you went to Savannah and you started working for a buddy's hearing aid company, in a sense. Is that when you started working for him? Did you start your own company? Like, how did you move to Greenville?
So I was really good at what I was doing, and I think it's around this time this entrepreneurial thing kicked back in, because I started to really see ways we could improve things. And I started to as I had more success in the company, my ideas were taken more seriously, and I was able to have more input and to get a seat at the table. And sorry,
No problem.
I got to move up in advance and get into higher levels from a business standpoint, and that was really my crash course in business and
You got to see behind the scenes. So.
Yeah, I got to really learn hands-on instead of having to sit in a classroom and read books and that stuff. I got to do it, build a company. So that was a totally priceless experience. I'm extremely grateful for, and I learned so much with those guys for that time. But we grew the company from 3 clinics to 60 clinics within 3 years, and I was doing a lot of traveling. I had a lot of people. I was training everybody in the company in sales at that time. So that it landed me in Greenville. We had a issue with the Spartanburg office. I needed to cover for a while, and I really just fell in love with the area up here. And
nice.
It was around that time I was allowed to settle down and stay where I wanted and get off the road. But shortly after that, the company got bought by a big corporation, and some things started to change, and I wanted to get out. I was under contract, but I was able to get out of that, and I started Atlas Coatings in Greenville.
Cool.
And it's been almost 3 years now since that happened. We do concrete floor coatings. People think of epoxy. That's kind of been the standard. This is a different type of product.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Is it a concrete look?
No, it's like a flake floor, but people think of the loud, bright colors on a garage floor. Since polyurea has become more popularized and known as a more reliable floor coating for concrete, epoxy can't go outside.
Got it.
Polyurea can go anywhere. We do lifetime warranties on all our floors, and so the companies that make these flake colors know that this is now going to be on patios and pool decks and driveways and in retail spaces and all this stuff. And so the array of colors and designs and looks and aesthetics is so vast at this point. And so it's way outside just garage floors. And so, but the flake is functional. It's vinyl. It creates an impact resistant layer. You have UV stability, traction, texture. It's still easy to clean.
Nice.
And they just come out beautiful. And so we've been really blessed here in Greenville. We do a lot of beautiful work. We have amazing guys working over here, and it's been great.
With this, you're also sustaining your sobriety. Are you still going to meetings every day?
No.
What's your sobriety look like nowadays?
So there was a time when I was still in Florida, and I was going to meetings every day, and I was sponsoring a lot of guys, and I was maybe doing too much. And my sponsor at that time had encouraged me to slow down. And I think you can do too much, but usually it's not enough. And at this point now, I think things have had a way of sort of stabilizing where it's been explained to me the proper priorities for a sober addict or alcoholic has to be sobriety as number one, / God, the spirit. They're kind of one and the same. That's number one. Number two is health. Number three is finances and career. And number four, way at the bottom of the list, is romance and relationships. And when those get disorganized, you see real problems happen. When a guy starts putting the gym over everything else, they're not going to last long. I've seen it a million times. When the girl becomes the most important thing, it's over. Or they become so obsessed with work that now they don't have time to be of service to anybody. It's over. And so that as long as I'm able to maintain that order of things, I've been good, and my life's gone unbelievably good. And
how'd you meet your wife?
I met my wife online, which I never thought would be possible because
more common.
I had so many failures online for so long, and so did she. And we both were so done with the dating apps, but I guess we both had around the same time, thought, okay, I'll just try one more time. This time will be
Sure.
different. And we had matched, and as soon as I matched with her, I deleted the app. I realized that if you want any success on those things, you can't stay on it.
Yeah.
It's insanity. So I matched with her. Okay, we'll meet at the Village Grind. Deleted the app. Went to Village Grind, and I just knew right away that I was going to marry this girl. You know, I worked with the elderly in the hearing aid business for a long time, and I learned so much, dude, during that job. And you have couples in there that are married 60, 70, 75 years, and it's like they have real wisdom that is not available on Google, you know what I mean? But I was shocked at how many of them, they've been married all these decades, so happy, love each other, and they got married, they knew each other for 4 weeks, and they got married back in the 1940s or 50s.
Quick.
And that was so normal then, and divorce rates were way lower, and people are still married, and it's a totally different thing. And I think now people our age make the mistake often, let's date until we're sick of each other, then let's get married.
Yeah, totally.
It's crazy, and so it's a real problem. So but they all told me, when you know, you know. And that rang true for me. I just knew immediately. And we were together 9 months. We got engaged in a hot air balloon in Oklahoma. That's where she's from.
Nice.
And we just got married in Oklahoma in July.
Very, very cool. With you in the sobriety community in Greenville, you've been described to me as somebody like they go to for like mentorship in a way. Do you hire a bunch of sober individuals?
I try to, yeah. They don't always work out, you know, but I keep trying. I'll give everybody a chance if I can, you know.
But talk to me through now, reflecting on, you know, your position within like a sobriety community. Like you have people now that are telling me that I had never met you, that you're an individual people seek out for that wisdom that you once seeked out. How does that make you feel?
It feels good to be used. You know, I don't want to ever get to a place where I think that this is me doing this, because I've just done the next right thing in front of me that was presented at that time, and this is where it brought me. You know, I'm just along for the ride, really.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
So to be a tool in the hand of the master, I think, is the greatest gift, and if that's what I get to be today, I'm grateful for that. You know.
Yeah.
And I do get I get calls from people I don't even know. And they have things they're going through and things, and it's the craziest thing. I start talking and I don't even know I don't know where it comes from. I don't know what I'm saying a lot of the time. It doesn't feel like I'm in control. So to be a channel, to just know that I'm the faucet, not the water, is a massive difference. You know, I don't want to let my ego get too much in the way and take credit for things that I'm not really responsible for. You know.
Yeah. Do you ever have moments when you think about using again?
It's been such a long time, I couldn't even tell you. And I go to a lot of concerts, music festivals. I go to bars and shoot pool and hang out. But
I do too. Yeah.
I don't. It's just the obsession's not there. But it's because of the work that I do on a daily basis. You know, even though I'm not at a meeting every day, I'm sponsoring a lot of guys and I'm talking to a lot of guys, and I'm praying a lot and doing the things that are suggested of me. I still have a sponsor. It's not like in the beginning where I'd call my sponsor every day. What color socks should I wear? You know. I talked to my sponsor who was in Oklahoma. We talk probably once a month, twice a month, and we stay current with each other. And of course, if I'm ever in a bind or I have something pressing or I need some advice, I have a lot of guys I can call.
When somebody's calling you and they're maybe not sober at the time, but they're struggling through something, where does your mind go? Like, what type of advice becomes the water you're giving them?
Most of the time, it's spiritual, and people don't want to hear that, and they don't want to talk about it, but it's always the answer.
Well, I like how you said earlier, like, you're just a tool, like, you're just living your life. Like, you know, you're not always the one maybe guiding it.
Right. Yeah, it's like my job is to do what I can to raise my sail, but God is the wind that pushes me to where I'm going. You know, somebody told me you will starve to death sitting in a closet praying for a hot dog. You got to meet God halfway. You got to meet the universe halfway. Whatever it is, I have to participate in my own recovery.
Sure.
But there is a spiritual solution to every problem. More God and more 12-step recovery, service, whatever it is, that really is always the answer. And usually in talking to somebody, they might show up saying, this is my problem right here. But after talking to them for 5 minutes, we find out that the problem is actually a few steps deeper behind the scenes there with what am I doing in my free time? What am I doing for my spirit? Who am I thinking about besides myself? Who am I putting energy and effort into besides myself? Because the me, what about me? When am I going to get mine? I feel this way, I feel that way. That's where all the problems are.
Yeah.
It's all up here between the ears, you know. But you take a deep breath and realize right here, right now, I am okay. There really are no big deals today. God's got it. Whether I agree or not, whether I believe it or not, it's the truth. And it's like, man, that problem just evaporated.
Yeah.
It is so often people come with problems and after the phone call realize they don't actually have a problem. And it's the same for me.
Yeah.
You know,
and I do that in my head a lot of times. Like you are obsessing over issues that like, I'm like, damn, that's not even an issue. You know, like that's so far gone. And I will sometimes even obsess about things that like are in the past.
Yeah,
that could have happened.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's somebody, my buddy, I was just saying the other day, all the craziest arguments I've ever been in were just me driving on the highway by myself before I even get off the exit. You know?
Yeah.
I think it was Mark Twain. He said, "Oh, 99% of the things I ever worried about never even happened."
Definitely. That's such a true fact, and we get so caught up in it that we don't realize that, like, you take a step back and breathe and be like, wait,
yeah,
I'm actually okay.
Yeah, and it's all the negative emotion is in the past and the future. The past is remorse, regret, resentment, depression, you know. The future is fear, anxiety, stress, all that stuff's there. And so, but right here, right now, this very moment, you and I sit at this table,
Nothing's
things are
wrong.
great. Things are nice. Dude,
Yeah,
you know?
things are good.
Things are good right here, right now. If I can do what I can to stay right here, right now, I'm generally fine. The problem is doing that consistently. Maybe I could do it for 4 seconds, and then it's like, oh man, I have that customer next week, and it's like, I'm out. But I could remember, reconnect to the breath, reconnect to the now, and it's like, some of that stuff seems like foo-foo, new agey, whatever, but it's really, that's ancient wisdom.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
That's what helped me. I mean, and I was reaching out to individuals too, and like, I remember like sitting in a lazy boy, and I was basically going through withdrawals, and I was able to like breathe easy. And I just started like breathing and being like, all right, I'm gonna live, I'm gonna be okay. And that was like 30 seconds, and then that was 5 minutes, and then it was an hour, and then it's like, all right, I'm actually doing this thing.
Yeah. It's amazing.
With your relationship with your mom and your sister, how is that now?
I don't think it could be better. You know, it's such a gift to have. A lot of people don't like their family, and I don't think you have to like your family.
Not all of them, you know.
All of them, but I really genuinely love my family, you know, and we have a great relationship, and we all live in different places. We don't get to see each other all the time. I think that's something we've become accustomed to. I know some people stay close forever in the same town, and it's like the thought of one of them moving is like the end of the world. But we've never been bound by that because we've all just kind of spread out and done our thing, and but we're still communicate really pretty much every day and current with each other, and we get to see each other when we can and make trips and do things. And me and my sister took my mom to Italy for her 60th birthday last year.
Let's go.
We went to Croatia. We were in Venice with all our significant others, and we just had the best time, man.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
That's incredible.
So my dad actually ended up homeless, missing for almost 8 years. We thought he was dead. And I hadn't spoke to him since I got to make amends with him in 2017, and I had some peace over that. You know, there's a lot of forgiveness, compassion that came with sobriety and living on a spiritual basis. And all of a sudden, about a month ago, I get a call. He rode his bicycle from Houston, Texas to Palm Coast, Florida to try to find me. 1,800 miles or something.
Yeah. So
we spoke for the first time. And he said that he was laying there in Texas dying of alcoholism, and that he says he got a message from God. I don't know if he was crazy or what, but he said, the last thing I need to do before I die is find my son and tell him I love him and I'm sorry for everything. And so he came up here to Greenville recently, and in the process of helping him get back on his feet. And
Wow.
it's been a really crazy experience. I don't know any type of rule book on how to navigate that kind of thing, but I realized that, like I said, the things that I've been through have all kind of prepared me to handle this thing with some grace and patience, and it's real difficult sometimes, but it's been pretty cool to see.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
As we come to closure on this conversation, it's been such a pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
I think we got to talk about and give a shout out to Will Freemon, who
Absolutely.
connected us, and he looks up to you a lot. Willie Free.
I love that guy.
Yeah, me too. And he said you put together a retreat recently, and he absolutely loved it.
We did. You should come next year if you want.
When is it? Yeah, whenever you do it, I'm sure I'll know now. But thank you, Will, for connecting us, and he now, I think, is inspiring others, which is part of the process.
Hope so.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's great.
Great job.